I'm glad to welcome you all to the Upscale YouTube channel. My name is Igor Fox, and today we're going to have an interview with our funded trader named Ruslan. Ruslan will share his insights about trading, how he went through the challenge, who he is as a person, how he joined us, and everything in that vein. Hello, Ruslan.
Hello, Igor. Hello to all the viewers. I'm very glad to be here.
We're happy to hear that. Ruslan, please tell us a bit about yourself to start with. What do you do in real life, and how did it happen that you got into trading?
In real life, I work as a programmer. I'm a developer myself. I got into trading, or more specifically, into cryptocurrency somewhere around 2022. It was quite an interesting story. Before that, I didn't really believe in cryptocurrency. Well, like many people, I guess, before they got into it. To me, it was a complete scam. But I had a good friend who was a Bitcoin maximalist. And after 2021, he just showed me his results with Bitcoin. I really liked them, found them interesting, and that's how I ended up getting into cryptocurrency.
So basically, you got into crypto because you were caught up by FOMO and wanted to do the same?
Yeah, honestly, you could say that. That's probably exactly how it was. Besides that, as a dedicated programmer, I also found it all very interesting and quite compelling from a technical perspective. In fact, my initial experience with the fascinating world of cryptocurrency actually started with the innovative Ton blockchain, primarily because that's Telegram. And Nikolai Durov, the brilliant co-founder, originally started developing this groundbreaking technology. It truly seemed incredibly fascinating to me, so I enthusiastically began to thoroughly study and delve into its intricacies.
So from this whole story, I heard how you got into crypto in general because your friend showed you his PNK, you liked it, and you wanted to do the same. We're here on the Upscape YouTube channel, which is about prop trading. So how did you get into trading? How did your trading journey develop? Or maybe I don't know something.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'll try to answer it briefly, even though there's actually a lot to tell. Actually, I don't position myself as a trader at all. For me, that's quite a difficult job. I'd really call it a job. And if we, for example, set aside all the gamblers and only consider real traders, I think that to reach the level where you can call yourself a trader, you have to go through a pretty long journey. It takes a lot of learning, a lot of time spent looking at charts and so on. Plus, it's a very stressful job. You basically have to be in the market 24/7, constantly watching the charts. I don't do that, so I can't call myself a trader in the full sense of the word. That said, I'm still in crypto 24/7, but I do slightly different things. Specifically, I consider myself a crypto enthusiast. I invest in early stage projects, in NFTs, in various Telegram gifts, for example. I also understand DeFi protocols, and sometimes I provide liquidity. Occasionally, there are interesting opportunities to make money on funding rates, so I open delta neutral positions. Basically, in crypto, there's even a term for people like me. Usually we're called degenerates or degens. I'd probably put myself more in that group. Still, because I'm in the market 24 hours a day, constantly. Yeah, I was just about to ask, how is that related to trading and all that?
Exactly. I wanted to ask how that's connected to trading and so on.
Yes, since I constantly monitor the market and am always immersed in the market context, I found a way to use upscaling to earn money. I could probably talk about this in more detail during the interview. It's not exactly the standard trading path, with charts and technical analysis, but as it turns out, this strategy works. By the way, for me, this was also actually a kind of experiment.
So it looks like we're in for something interesting in today's interview.
I really hope the viewers will find it interesting and enjoyable. Moreover, I truly believe that my extensive experience could even significantly help existing traders who consistently work with technical analysis and detailed charts. It might in fact show them a slightly different, perhaps even a fresh perspective.
Can you please tell me, when you initially joined Upscale, we specifically provided you with the necessary capital, you successfully passed through all the challenge phases, and then you ultimately moved on to a fully funded account. Is that correct? But before Upscale, did you ever actively trade with your own personal money or on other trading platforms? Did you truly have that significant opportunity, or was Upscale your very first and initial entry point into the world of trading?
Yes, of course, but mainly, honestly, about 90% of my trades, or maybe even more, are related to trading in some way because buying coins for a spot wallet is also a kind of trading. I buy them at a certain moment and then sell them at a time that's favorable for me. In essence, that's also trading, but we tend to call it investing, right? When it comes to trading in the way people usually think of it, in most people's minds, trading means things like futures, leverage, and so on. I've had those kinds of trades as well. Well, of course, the realization
of your profits, you could say. Yes.
Of course, I've had those kinds of trades, but they're quite rare. Before Upscale, I might have had one trade like that every 3 or 6 months, and only according to the strategy that I generally try to use on Upscale as well.
We've often talked about your comprehensive strategy so many times, but we've never actually shared it with our eager listeners. So let's now thoroughly show your impressive strategy. Let's move on to discussing it in detail. So,
Yeah, I think that's great. Are you suggesting we show it right away on the chart, or should I say a few words about it first?
tell us, yes, first, please explain in detail how you typically trade, and then we will certainly start showing it to everyone.
Yes, basically, in fact, this strategy, in my opinion, is not complicated if you are constantly involved in the crypto market, always keeping track of what's happening there. That means you probably have a large information field. Like in my case, I have quite a broad information field when it comes to cryptocurrencies. I'm subscribed to a lot of Twitter accounts, Telegram channels, and Discord servers, and I constantly get information, so to speak, straight from the source, directly from the projects themselves. So as you've probably already figured out, this is basically, if I'm not mistaken, called news trading.
And
And that's exactly what I do, yes. Well, besides that, sometimes I also use, so to speak, trend trading. To go into more detail, for example, recently we had EP ROS happening daily for quite a long time. And with enough screen time, again, looking at the chart and keeping an eye on the market, it was very easy to catch on to that movement and, so to speak, ride along with it a bit, which basically helped me draw my first conclusion.
yes, so please tell us, you mentioned news trading. Usually, when people hear about news trading, they imagine something like an FOMC meeting, where, for example, interest rates are raised or lowered, or they look at various indicators like non-farm payrolls. Is this related to your approach to news trading, or do you rely on other types of news?
Absolutely not related. Moreover, probably the biggest and most unpleasant losses I suffered were precisely when I tried to follow the news from the Fed. One of the biggest losses was, if you remember, when Pavel Durov was detained in France and when he was about to be released. He had spent some time there and they were supposed to let him go soon. The entire crypto market, you could say, was following this case. And generally, well, again, in my experience, I usually see that at such moments a kind of whipsaw begins. People get liquidated in both directions because the chart becomes extremely volatile, it swings back and forth, and it's very hard to enter a position if you have tight stop losses. If you're used to trading with a short stop, most likely you'll get stopped out. My strategy, on the other hand, is more based on suddenness, on unexpected news, when a project, for example, launches some new service or announces a new partnership or something along those lines. These kinds of news are usually unexpected, no one is waiting for them, and no one knows about them in advance. When they come out, if you're quick and get the news before others, then you have the opportunity to enter a position ahead of everyone else.
Can you show us any examples?
Yes, of course, I'd be happy to show you. I've actually picked out a couple of pretty interesting examples. They're quite illustrative. I want to say right away that things like this definitely don't happen every day. These are more successful cases, but they're very clear and useful for demonstration. After that, I'll also mention a couple of simpler examples of things you could pay attention to. Let's take the first example. It's a news story about Pavel Durov. Since we're in AFSC or Storm Trade, we're quite familiar with TON, so I'll probably start with this example. It was a pretty interesting one. I'll say right away that this strategy doesn't really work anymore. When Durov posts some news about TON now, it doesn't have much impact on the chart because he started doing it quite often, and it's like the market has gotten used to it. So at this point, it doesn't work very well. But literally just a year or a year and a half ago, around a year to a year and a half, this worked quite well. And one of the examples I want to show is Durov's post from February 28, 2024. Here, he officially announced that Telegram would indeed start paying channels for advertising, specifically within the TON ecosystem, or more precisely, in the TON cryptocurrency itself. This was probably the first time Pavel Durov mentioned TON in the past 6 months, maybe even a year. Before that, he hadn't mentioned TON for a very long time. Here, on the second image, I have a chart. This is the chart from February 28th. It actually shows just insane growth here, because at that moment, TON was hovering around $2 and it almost reached 3. So again, if you were to, say, open a position here with a small amount of capital or without leverage, you'd probably make a modest profit. But if you used a large amount of capital, this would turn out to be quite a good move. Fortunately, I managed to catch this move. I saw the news right away because I had notifications enabled for Pavel Durov's channel. As soon as I saw the word ton there, the first thing I did was open the exchange, set the leverage to 25 times, and enter the trade. Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't have Upscale yet, nor did I have such a large amount of capital, but with 25 times leverage, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think I captured about 600 to 700% of the move, considering the leverage from that trade. I closed it almost at the very top, because I didn't believe that 103 would be broken by the news, and somewhere around there, I don't remember exactly. There were two take profits. One was, I think, at 2.8, and the second was around 2.9, maybe, something like that. That's roughly how it looked. So I basically captured the entire move. The only thing is, of course, when I entered the trade, it was already somewhere. Well, the chart had already made a strong move by that point. So I had to make a decision very quickly, which is why I was actually a bit lucky here. And
You know what I'm curious about? I'm really interested to hear which coins you feel most at home with, or maybe if you have a favorite setup. So I've already realized that your trading style is news trading, which is actually pretty impressive. There aren't many people like that, especially those who actually trade profitably, because usually they get wiped out. As we can see, you pay attention to certain local news, focusing on specific markets. So I'm curious, in which markets do you feel comfortable? Maybe it's the EVM network, maybe it's Solana, maybe it's TON, or maybe it's something more local.
to genuinely answer your specific question, I'd personally say I really feel most comfortable and secure with coins that are not highly volatile. Definitely not low cap coins, no meme coins, no low capitalization assets whatsoever. So mainly, for example, it could be a prominent cryptocurrency like Ethereum. It could be TON. It could be some of the various layer 2 networks, or it could be major decentralized exchanges with their associated tokens. In other words, these are mostly high capitalization assets that are generally quite stable. This is because when some truly significant, positive, and major news comes out about a particular project, even a high capitalization asset can indeed make a really good and substantial move. And that's exactly what I tried to catch. That's the most interesting thing for me.
So you actually genuinely like the entire crypto world itself, and you diligently follow the main influential players. And when these significant players post any important news or updates, you then take full advantage of that situation.
Yes, exactly.
Do you have any other examples of trades that have worked out for you, maybe for the guys? So we saw the example with Pavel Durov. Maybe you have something else.
I prepared a few examples specifically to show the guys to make it more visual and interesting. So we can move on to the second piece of news. This news was posted in the channel, in the private channel. Here, someone just went to APE FEST. This is about the ApeCoin token. This person went to APE FEST Yuga Labs, the company that is accordingly the issuer of ApeCoin, as well as the creators of those very same apes. I think everyone who's into cryptocurrency is pretty familiar with them.
Yeah, those very monkeys you see everywhere.
Yes, exactly. Those are the same apes. So every year they organize Ape Fest, putting together these grand events that are quite beautiful and interesting. And so this person simply attended the event. Here he was sharing the atmosphere of the event on his channel. And right here, there was a moment during the event when someone on stage announced that ApeCoin mainnet would go live today. And the coin, as we already knew from the news, ApeCoin will be the gas token for ApeChain. Right away, it seemed to me that this was a pretty bullish event for the crypto market. So I immediately opened a long position. If you look at the chart on that day, basically August 20th, it almost, August 20th, maybe I got that wrong. What kind of move did it make? October 20th. So on that day, October 20th, this coin made almost a 100% pure move.
I'm afraid to even imagine how much profit you made.
Actually, the profit I made was minimal. Well, it was pretty insignificant, you could say, for one simple reason. I rarely keep assets in stablecoins. As a rule, stablecoins get moved somewhere else very quickly, usually into some high-risk assets and so on. So unfortunately, at that time, I had very few stables on the exchanges. And even with leverage, I still wasn't able to take out a really large amount. And that's exactly when I found this example. I thought, damn, if I had Topscale's capital at that moment, it would have been a really great result.
It sounds like a native integration, but that's actually how it is. Because Upscale provides capital scaling. Do you have any other interesting examples?
I'm sure that
we'll see more of them when we look at the personal account, but I'd like to see something relevant at the moment.
Yes, I have another example, and this is probably the last one I prepared. I specifically chose a slightly simpler example with a smaller movement, but events like this happen much more often. You can catch those too. There won't be such big moves, but overall, you can still make money on them. For example, this is a post from June 18th. Not long ago, I think I closed my second challenge thanks to it, if I'm not mistaken. That's when I already had a trade in Upscale. Mantle, as I closely follow Mantle among many other significant projects, there was already a clear kind of hint and some insider information that Mantle would indeed be launching a brand new product, specifically a payment system. Basically, this would involve their very own card that you could conveniently use to pay in various stores with cryptocurrency. So at one particular point, they just prominently posted this kind of news on June 18th, stating there were only a couple of hours left. At first glance, it seems like a rather vague announcement that doesn't really say anything. But for people who are immersed in the Mantle ecosystem, it immediately becomes clear that most likely some bullish news is coming. Here, I also opened a long position on this almost immediately. And here's a rather interesting chart. Why is that? Because it's hard for me to say whether this particular news actually had an effect or not. As you can see, there was a slight drop here and then it started to grow. Yes, gradually. But here specifically, if before I was showing daily charts, this time I zoomed in a bit and used the hourly chart. And as we can see here, I specifically highlighted the time on the screenshot. They published this news at 6 p.m. and exactly at 6 p.m. this growth started. I don't know if I was lucky or not. I mean, did this news actually work out, or did we just basically compensate for this movement? But nevertheless, it worked out and worked well.
So let's move on to your terminal now and take a look. Specifically, Upscale, let's switch over together.
Yes, let's do that, Igor. I just wanted to finish my thought since I led up to it in an interesting way. The thing is, this news trading, it's not, how should I put it? It's not a magic pill, not a golden grail, so to speak, where every piece of news will play out 100%. There are news events that actually play out in the opposite direction. You can easily get it wrong here. And that's why, secondly, or actually I would even say that news is secondary, the first principle I use is still risk management. What exactly does that mean in trading, in the positions themselves? It means tight stop losses. In other words, thanks to proper risk management, I can close a lot more trades at a loss than at a profit. But even so, my P&L results will still be positive.
Ruslan, now we've moved from your terminal to Upscale. Tell me, how many accounts have you taken on in total? How many attempts did it take you to pass the challenge? And was it difficult for you? How much time did you spend on it?
Well, look, I only bought one challenge for $25,000 and I was gifted a $5,000 challenge. I still haven't used it yet. As you can see, it's still at stage 1. I haven't traded on it even once yet. I only purchased one challenge. I actually bought it, you could say, during the pre-sale. Because I found out about Upscale in the very first days. At that time, there was a situation where trading hadn't started yet, but you could buy the challenge in advance with a 50% discount. That seemed interesting to me. So I bought it. Right away, as I said, I immediately started thinking about what strategy I would use on it and what I needed it for. And also, as I mentioned, since I'm not only involved in trading in crypto, I also thought that with a new project, you definitely need to be an OG in it, just like in all the other projects, because there might be some kind of retro drop or something else. So for me, it was a win-win situation. I bought the challenge right away. It took me quite a while to complete it. I went through 2 stages of the challenge, probably for almost 3 months. I wasn't in any rush. As I said, I opened trades there as carefully as possible. Basically, almost 100% of the trades were ones where I was absolutely sure I would make a profit. But on the actual trading account, of course, I messed around a little bit, and I'll talk about that in detail. I'll show what mistakes I made, what I didn't like, and where I really shouldn't have done certain things. Fortunately, those mistakes weren't fatal, right? Because I still have my account. It's even in the positive at the moment, and I've already made a withdrawal. But I'll still show where I made mistakes and what I wouldn't recommend others do as well.
The analytics department sent over some statistics on your account, specifically for the funded phase. And you know what? During the funded phase, you made 82 trades. Your win rate was 47%. So it would seem that even though you do news trading, you don't use indicators and so on, your win rate is still quite high. Your maximum profit was $571, while your maximum loss was $485. Also, your average holding time for positions was 3 hours, but the median holding time was 9 minutes. So more than 50% of your trades were held for less than 9 minutes. How did you manage that? Does that sound accurate?
It does sound accurate. I'm actually surprised by such a high win rate. Honestly, I thought my win rate was no more than 30%, and it really shouldn't have been higher. And about the median, I'll explain that now. Actually, it's really unfortunate that you can't check it. And if you can, if you have that information, it would be great to share it. Because as I said, I approach the challenges themselves more cautiously. There were far fewer trades there. Most likely the win rate won't be as high. But the most interesting thing is that these challenges were completed in just 1 or 2 trades. So there were a few conditional trades that were losses with a tight stop loss. There was 1 or 2 trades that were basically rockets. Basically, almost the entire challenge was completed in a single trade.
But how did it happen that you finished the challenge in just 1 or 2 days? But at the same time, each phase has its own limit on profitable trading days. Specifically, in the first phase, it's 3 trading days, and in the second phase, it's 5 profitable trading days. How did you deal with that? Because with your style of news trading, it's unlikely you manage to catch news every day.
That's right. And that was exactly the problem. For me, in fact, in prop trading, the main limitation is precisely these profitable days. Because when we're talking specifically about pure news trading, it's actually quite difficult to catch a good news event and latch onto it. And that can happen very rarely, but when it does, the profits are good. As I said, I think it was the second stage. There was some news, and I managed to catch a good move on Mantle, rode that wave, and I already had a good P&L, meaning my total balance was already solid. But at the same time, that was only my first profitable day, and I basically had to gamble my way through 4 more profitable days. I don't think I can call it anything else. Luckily, I had earned enough there. I caught that move really well, so I had a cushion and could afford to lose a bit at some point. Honestly, I probably can't remember all the details anymore, but it was like I just needed 1 or 2 trades to lock in that solid percentage I needed to earn. And those profitable days were basically just gambling. It was the same thing as when I was withdrawing. So it happened during my first withdrawal. On profitable days, I basically had to just play games in the background, so to speak, because in just a couple of trades, I had already made enough for the withdrawal, which would have been enough for me to cash out. But at that point, I had only closed out 2 profitable days. I think I had to push for 3 profitable days, maybe 1 or 2 more. And that was the hardest part for me, right? That part.
You know, Ruslan, in trading, there's this phrase, I'll just push it to $100 or something like that. Like I have a KPA for 10 trades and I've only done 8. You have to push through, which isn't the best strategy out there.
Exactly, that's exactly how it is. But since, as it turns out, in the actual scale-up, you have to fit within a 14-day period to make a withdrawal, right? Like it's shown here, for example. Well, basically, I didn't have time. I just needed to rack up those profitable days. And the trades there were exactly like that, you know, basically right on the edge, very precise. Take profits were all set just to grab. Well, in my case, a profitable day means $125. And there, the take profits were set at around $130 to $132, basically just to barely close it out. So I didn't need to reach a certain amount. I just needed profitable days so I could press that coveted withdrawal button.
Now, since you currently have your comprehensive trading history readily open right in front of you, could you please meticulously highlight which of those specific trades were indeed news-based, and in a more general sense, what precisely they were all about?
I've just scrolled this history all the way to the bottom, and I'd like to explain how it all worked out for me. As you can see, there were losing trades at the beginning, and I'll explain, just as I mentioned before, unfortunately, the history from the stages isn't available. Maybe there was something more interesting there, especially regarding news trading that I could have talked about. But specifically in my funded account, which I've had for just over a month, unfortunately, there wasn't a really nice example that I could show on charts or screenshots. But here, a different situation played out. Again, you could probably also call it a kind of news trading, and I'll try to explain. The thing is, when I first got the funded account, I actually missed the entire first 14-day period. I don't think I made a single trade during that time. Maybe there was one losing trade among those, but basically there were no profitable days. Nothing was closed out. Well, fortunately, I read the scaling rule and realized that there was no problem with that. If you don't trade during those 14 days, you can just trade in the following ones. There are no penalties or issues. So honestly, I just didn't worry about it and didn't pay much attention to it. And right around the end of that 14-day period, we started getting some really bullish news about Ethereum. Well, first of all, the chart showed it too, right? Ethereum grew a lot during that time.
Yeah, at one point it was around 3,900 actually.
Yeah, right now it's hovering around 3,700 to 3,900. It's in a pretty wide sideways range at the moment. But before that, yeah, it was under 3,000. And there were these big spikes like rockets. But it didn't just happen out of nowhere. There were actually a lot of bullish news stories coming out about Ethereum. At that time, a lot of companies started adding Ethereum to their balance sheets. Overall, the crypto market is being regulated, like Trump signing the law on stablecoins, his law on banning CBDCs, and the introduction of regulated stablecoins in the US, and so on. So there was a lot of positive news in the crypto market. Naturally, seeing all these movements and news, I couldn't miss the opportunity. I decided to trade. As you can see, my first trades weren't successful. ETH, Arbitrum, ETH, I wasn't hitting the mark. I think there was probably some emotional trading here, or maybe I just pressed the wrong button because it looks like I closed these trades right away. You can see that all of these were stopped out. These were losses of about 0.5% of my capital, and here even less, like 0.2 to 0.3% of my capital.
By the way, can you tell me what your risk-reward ratio is for each trade?
My risk reward works as follows. I never go below 3 to 1. So roughly speaking, if I'm willing to lose $100 on a trade, then I'm aiming to make $300 from it. That's my minimum risk reward. But usually when it comes to news trading, or like in this case, which I think wasn't even news trading, but more likely trend trading, since we had Ethereum with take profits, I generally didn't set take profits. Instead, I would move my stop loss. As soon as I saw a good upward movement, I would immediately move my stops, at least to break even, and then keep them quite far from the marker, but always in profit, gradually trailing them up. When I saw the movement start to stall, when the chart was clearly losing momentum, I would either close the position at market, or if it hit my stop, the stop would already be very close to the marker, so a small move would close me out at the stop. In other words, a stop in profit. So there were almost no take profits. But I want to clarify that doesn't mean I don't use take profits. I do use them. But specifically during this period when I was trading on a funded account, I didn't see any point in setting take profits because I couldn't really tell when the move would end. So I tried to hold on as long as possible. Yes, you could say that. And so it turns out I entered some losing trades, but here I opened a good position, and maybe the analytics team gave you the wrong info. You said the max was about $400, but I think the max was almost $1,000 that I pulled out here. And as you said, the most dangerous thing is trying to hit a round number. As you can see, I don't do that at all because that's exactly the kind of greed that can make you lose everything. So these are the amounts I ended up with. Here I caught a good trade, and here too, though I don't remember why I had a -6. Either I opened and immediately changed my mind or something else happened, but that's how it went. And here I had 3 good trades, and basically this was my core for withdrawal. If you look closely, you can see that on the 10th there was a trade, then on the 11th, so I had at most 2 profitable days here. At this point I was ready to withdraw, and I really wanted to, but the scaling rules didn't allow it, so I kept trading. As I said, some gambling started here, although actually this is the 11th, and for some reason I had a lot of trades on the 11th. Apparently the market was moving well, and I was just trying to catch every move out of greed. Then, starting from the 12th, I think I began trying to rack up profitable days. I remember this clearly because I really wanted those profitable days. I'll explain later what tripped me up in all this. So here I placed a trade and lost. Here I got stopped out. All my losing trades are always stops. It's very unlikely that I close a trade manually at a loss. I just watch. And if I see the trade is about to hit my stop, I never move it. That's probably one of my main rules. Never think, oh, it'll turn around now, I'll just move the stop a bit lower. I think that's a big mistake that can really cost you. If I set a stop for a trade, I have to be ready to lose that money. So if it hits the stop, I'm out. Here, as you can see, I was trying to rack up profitable days. I probably didn't manage it here, then tried again, and apparently it didn't work out. As you can see on the 12th, then I skipped the 13th because I had a big loss and didn't like it. So I decided to take a break and stay out of the market. I realized I didn't understand it, so I didn't trade. On the 14th, I took a risk, lost again, and quit. On the 15th, as I said, I managed to get that profitable day, and I stopped there. On the 16th, I tried to get another profitable day. At first, I got stopped out, but then I managed to close a profitable day, and I probably should have stopped there.
So mainly you were trading Ethereum, as we can see, and at the same time you were keeping an eye on the news background.
Yes, that's about right. But actually, when I was racking up profitable days, as I mentioned, it started to look more like gambling. It wasn't even so much about the news background anymore. I was just watching the chart and catching those corrections during the growth. So as the price was going up and then corrected a bit, I would try to enter a trade right there to catch the next upward movement,
A counter position.
to take profit from it, something like that. So as you can see, on the 16th, I also closed a profitable day, moving smoothly to the 17th. Here again, there was a stop loss, another loss, then I recovered. And here I basically broke even. And then on the 17th, there were several good moves on ETH and Kaita. I decided to open a position on Kaita, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was also on a rise, and it broke through some round number. I honestly can't remember exactly, but I recall that I was already focusing on the price range and some support zones, so to speak. When I saw that the coin shouldn't go down, it should, or rather, it broke through and should go up, or maybe it bounced off that level, something like that. So here, there was some minimal, let's say, noob level technical analysis. I was basically just focusing on the numbers, either a round number or a support zone. But as I said, this was basically gambling. And then on the 18th, as far as I remember, I closed my fifth profitable day. At that point, I was already confident that I was on a roll. And then, if I'm not mistaken, there were some small trades. I just want to highlight an interesting moment where I probably made a bit of a mistake. Here, as you can see, I caught some really good moves on ETH and I already had a good buffer. I had exceeded my daily profit target by a lot, so I could close the day profitably. And then I started experiencing what's called gambling addiction. Here's what it looked like. The coin PENGU. I don't know why, but I really like this token. I hold it mid to long term. I got it, if I'm not mistaken, from an airdrop for holding some NFT, and then I bought more during dips. I believe in this penguin community that if we get an alt season and the market moves well, this coin probably won't just sit still. So I'm holding it on spot. It had an interesting moment that day. Memecoins were pumping, giving 10% plus gains. As you remember, I said I never traded memecoins, but here I decided to try. I saw coins like WIF, Pepe, and other high cap meme coins, well, high cap for meme coins, making good moves, 10 to 15% gains, while Pengu was basically flat. So I opened a long position on it and watched it for half a day. There was this choppy sideways movement up and down, but I set a wider stop and just watched it all day. In the end, I just lost patience, got tired of it, waited for at least some profit, and closed the position. Then I saw that the whiff had pumped too much, and I think I shorted it here. Yeah, as you can see, I don't know why, but it feels like there should have been just one trade, but it got split up, or I closed it in parts. So basically, I caught some shorts on whiff. This was the 20th, right? I messed around a bit more with ETH, and here's the point of all this. At this moment, I started to lose my head. This is the classic tilt and FOMO. Why? Because ETH had been growing steadily every day. And with my risk model, I was only taking small moves, $130, $140 to close a profitable day. And then I'd stop trading just to rack up those profitable days. But I realized that if I'd held my trades longer, like I did before, I probably could have had results like I showed at the beginning, where I could close trades for $500 or $700. I probably could have done that here too. I started to feel FOMO, like I was missing out on this bull market. That's when the gambling started. Here, I managed to take some profits on meme coins. If you sum up the whole day, the 20th, by the end of it, I'd made about $800 to my balance. I was really happy that day, went to bed satisfied. The next day, I woke up euphoric, believing in myself, thinking I was really getting the hang of the market, like I was in sync with it. I thought, why not try to make even more? At that point, my capital was about $2,500, so I'd made almost 10% on my capital. I thought everything would keep going well. Then greed kicked in. I had all my profitable days. I had a capital buffer, so why not try to earn even more? I looked at Pengu, the coin I'd held all day yesterday, which hadn't moved, and now it was up 10%. For some reason, I thought it would be a good idea to open shorts on it. First, I opened a long, got stopped out, and then it had already moved more than 10% for the day, so I started shorting it. Here I shorted it, and honestly, I just made a basic mistake. I opened with too much capital, basically my whole account, and set a wide stop. So I immediately lost $500 on that trade. Stopped, thought, damn, that's a shame. I need to win it back, and started shorting it again.
So basically, you started experiencing emotional swings, right?
Yeah, I had FOMO, emotions, and I just started shorting on emotions, which is probably one of the biggest problems for traders in general. When liquidations happen, people start believing in their position and try to hold on to it until the end. And as you can see here, this is a perfect example. I get stopped out here, I get stopped out here, I get stopped out here, and here again. The stop losses are pretty tight, but they keep getting hit. And the most interesting thing is that on that very day, PENGU actually went up by about 25% or something like that, and I was trying to short it everywhere, and that was probably my main mistake in all my trading on Upscale. I was just acting on emotion here. Then apparently I tried to go long on Ethereum here, but as you can see, nothing worked out. And in the end, on the 21st, I closed with a loss of $1,100, which is practically a liquidation of my trading account, because the maximum I can lose is $1,250. Still, I had a pretty decent amount of positive capital left, about $1,500. So overall, I didn't end up in the red. I had made profits before that. But it was definitely frustrating to see that number, especially after putting in so much effort trying to trade it out and then just losing it all at once. And this FOMO, which for me is a huge lesson, just shows that you absolutely can't give into it. Once again, I realized that meme coins are not for me. And then the next day, I started trading something else.
A meme in the form of Trump, as I noticed. Carter mentioned it the next day after my streak of losses.
No, that's Ethereum and Trump, yeah. But it pulled back here, or rather here, I actually managed to make some money on it.
I said I wouldn't trade meme coins, and the next day I went and traded meme coins.
Yeah, but that was a day later. It was the next day. And apparently, I don't know. I guess I just hadn't gotten over it yet at that point. Because my next trades should have been back on normal coins, if you can call them that. So as you can see here, yeah, I managed to recover a little bit somewhere, but then I started losing again. And what interests me most is to get to the point where I already made a withdrawal. Because right here, this was supposed to be the start of a new period for me. Somewhere around here, I should have cut off the old period. I already made a withdrawal, and in the new period, it was the same story. We can take a look
at your withdrawal history. The date will be listed there.
Yes, we'll take a look here. But again, I just wanted to show this illustrative example that right here, basically, I took my shot, so to speak, on these mistakes. And then I just went back to trading the same old Ethereum, because with Ethereum, we still have quite an interesting news background at the moment. And here, it was the same story. I was taking stops, basically getting stopped out on small losses, and managed to catch these kinds of moves. So at the moment, I have a small profit on my capital. Most likely I won't withdraw during this period because I'm already on day 8 out of 14. I have 2 profitable days, and most likely these are exactly those 2 profitable days. Here, basically at first, it seems like in the new period I went into the red again with the same memes, and then roughly speaking, I pulled myself together. If you look at the history, yes, it turns out my first challenge was closed on May 16th. Sorry about that. Yes, my first challenge was closed on May 16th.
The first phase.
The first phase, yes. The second phase was closed on June 24th, and my first withdrawal happened on July 22nd. So I completely missed the first 14-day period, and in the second one, I managed to get some results.
But overall, you didn't rush and just move toward your goal.
Yes, and I even managed to experiment a little along the way.
As a funded trader, tell me, please, imagine this situation. Your friend wants to take on a challenge. What 3 things would you tell him to do right after buying it?
That's quite an interesting question, yes. But probably, first of all, I would make him really understand risk management. I mean, as you saw even from the history of my trades, it was very important to stick to risk management. If I hadn't followed it, most likely I simply wouldn't have been able to pass these challenges. I would have been liquidated somewhere along the way. Understand risk management, and from that, probably the second piece of advice, yes, the second piece of advice would be to always set a stop loss. There should never be a trade without a stop loss, especially in funded trading, because here liquidation happens much sooner than when trading with your own capital. And as a third piece of advice, I would probably wish him good luck, because risk management and stop losses will at least help him not to lose as quickly, even if he does lose, as he would without these tips.
And what if you were starting from scratch, opening a new account now? Let's say you have 5,000.
To
What would you do differently when taking the challenge, or would you even do it at all?
As for the percentage, specifically when it comes to challenges, I would go through them exactly the same way I did before because I took my time, I didn't rush. There was also an advantage back then. There were no 14-day periods, so you could close profitable days over a long period of time. That's why I wasn't in a hurry. I will go through them exactly the same way as I did the challenges on my main current account. But if we look at my entire account experience as a whole, what I definitely won't do is gamble on memes again. I didn't like it. It only brought negatives. I wanted to try it. I tried. It didn't work out, and I won't do it anymore.
Let's make it official right here on the recording. Ruslan will no longer trade meme coins. Ruslan, will you trade meme coins?
Absolutely not.
Ruslan, our interview is already coming to an end. You've told us who you are, what you do, what brought you to trading, about your trading style, how you went through the challenge, the mistakes you made along the way, and overall we're coming to a logical conclusion. Remind us, please, what payout did you receive, and what did you decide to spend that money on, if you spent it at all?
So my payout after Upscale's commission was deducted was $1,050 net to my wallet. Well, it was $1,050 and some change, but we can round it off. And as for spending, I haven't done anything with the money yet. They're still sitting in the same Ton wallet, and I haven't decided where to put them since there hasn't been anything interesting on the market so far. Most likely, they'll definitely go into reinvestment. I doubt I'll withdraw them. Yes, it will definitely be a reinvestment. But exactly where, I can't say yet. I haven't decided.
What did you feel at the very moment when you received the payout? Did you have any special feelings?
I did. It was interesting. What did I feel? Why was it so fast? Because in the Upscale interface, when I requested the withdrawal, it said it would take about 2 days, but the money arrived in about 4 hours. I was surprised it was so fast. Of course, I was happy. It was very pleasant, mainly because it marked the end of a certain story. As I mentioned earlier, I invest in various projects at early stages, in NFTs and different stories in cryptocurrencies. So for me, essentially, every investment is a kind of story, and it always comes to an end one way or another. Not all of them have come to an end yet. Some will eventually, either because the project simply dies and accordingly my investment turns out to be unsuccessful, or on the contrary, the project takes off and then I'm really happy. And with Upscale, essentially, I initially considered it as an investment too. I bought a challenge, I put a certain amount of money into it, and when I made my first withdrawal, it was about, I think, around 7 times my initial investment. That was kind of the end of the story, but at the same time, there was a pleasant aftertaste because the account funding remained with me, and maybe this is far from the end of the whole story. So that's the feeling I experienced.
To wrap things up, what advice would you give to those who still haven't decided whether to trade on Upscale? What would you recommend, wish, or say from your own experience as someone who has already gone through this whole journey?
I would probably say just one thing. You definitely shouldn't be afraid here. You need to give it a try. As I mentioned before, I didn't really have any real trading experience before this. I mean, the number of futures trades I've made on Upscale during this time is more than I had ever made in all my time in crypto before. I had never made that many trades before. To be honest, I didn't really believe I would succeed. It was an experiment, as I mentioned before. For me, it was also a kind of experiment to give it a try. I was lucky and it worked out. So let's hope that it's not just luck, but also some skill, some ability. For people who are thinking about giving it a try, I really think you should go for it, especially if you have no, how should I put it, no confidence in trading. Basically, if you're a complete beginner, I would definitely recommend taking on this challenge, even if it's just a simple, inexpensive one. It costs very little, and at the same time, it's a really good training that can eventually lead to real earnings. And if you don't manage to make money from this and you fail the challenge, at least you won't lose as much money as you could lose trading futures directly on the exchange.
So, is it psychologically easier to trade with prop trading?
It's much easier psychologically. And most importantly, with relatively low risks, you get access to a fairly large amount of capital. You don't need any astronomical returns and you don't have to use huge leverage. By the way, when I showed the account, there was not a single trade with leverage higher than 2 times. And even with 2 times leverage, there were only a couple of trades. All the rest were with 1 times leverage. And what's interesting is that you don't even really need leverage at all. If you have a large amount of capital, it's enough to take a small percentage of the moves. And on a large capital, that's already a significant amount, rather than doing it with a small sum and high leverage.
Glad to hear from you, Ruslan. We're happy that you succeeded. We look forward to seeing new traders funded on our platform. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will be releasing many more interviews, useful content, and live streams. See you soon. Talk to you soon.